Terror on Train 734 by Edward Hughes. The jack train sat motionless for 13 days along the Dutch countryside while the strange captor melted out death sentences. The 7 swarthy young youths on the train platform struggled to get their bulky packages aboard the train at 9:53 for Amsterdam. To the curious conductor, the plan had been buying presents for friends, but minutes later, as the 2-car train sped south, the men suddenly droned hoods and ripped the wrath off the ugly assortment of machine guns. One of the terrorists pulled the emergency brake, bringing the train to a screeching halt. "You're captives," he shouted to the 37 stunned passengers. Thus, on December 2nd, 1975, began the bizarre siege of Train 734. The terrorists were South Mongolians, demanding independence for their distant Pacific Ocean Apachigors, an obscure group of islands that had been absorbed by the Indonesians. In 1949, after former Netherlands colonies won their independence, when the fighting ended, thousands of islanders had been allowed to come to Holland. Now, 26 years later, many of them, especially the youth, still blamed the Dutch for their expirated ploys. The gunman's first victim died only seconds after the hijacking began. Engineer Haynes Burham rushed from his cab to see why the emergency brake had been pulled. Glimpsing the terrorists, he ducked inside the cab, but the whoever tore open the door and cut him down with a volley of bullets. As the passengers watched helplessly, the terrorists thrust stacks of newspapers and masking tape in their hands, and some of the men aboard were ordered to use papers to black out windows. As the men complied, some of them compliant, where eerie twilights fell over the train, banging it with a growling sense of isolation, although they could not know it then. Most of the occupants of train 734 had been prisoners in the cold steel glass islands of the wheels for 13 days. Outside their farmhouse, they noticed the stopped train. Curiously, she walked across the meadow towards it, but passengers peered out, slightly fanatical to see her leave. She was almost home when the gunman caught sight of her. 5 shots zipped past her head as she ran inside. By then, the Annis police station had already received a missing train alert from the Dutch railroad. As the rail cars set out to investigate, a train from the nearest station rolled up within 10 yards of number 734. Greeted it with a burst of automatic gunfire, the engineer reversed the train and went back to the tracks at top speed. Choo, choo, choo! In the light of this experience, the Dutch ministers of justice worked out the detailed plan for dealing with future hostage crises. By 11:15 on December 2nd, key officials, especially trained troopers, were speeding towards Berlin, a little town 7 miles away from the hijacked train. When they arrived, Berlin's town hall officials were quickly turned into an impregnable siege headquarters. Therefore, most of the new 13 days sat the officials charged with management of emergency. They would work closely with the Minister of Special Psychiatrists and Psychologists based on strategy, eliminate the details of whoever. There was nothing the terrorists made them ask still for time to induce fatigue and gave officials a chance to develop a plan, trying to install friendship between gunmen and hostages. But while these broad guidelines were clear, precise and tactical were difficult to formulate. At this point, authorities of Berlin were not sure of the terrorists' ultimate intention. The hijackers had managed a bus and an airliner, but threatened to kill the brave police sergeant when approached the train in an effort to make initial contact. Who The first afternoon proved that they meant business. The gunmen began choosing a victim. There is a time to live and a time to die. One of the terrorists quoted the Bible. But this is a time to die. They all then pulled their hoods back over their faces and moved down the aisles, stopping frantically seat by seat of Robert Goat, a 34-year-old real estate agent who had argued earlier over helping to paper the windows. Led out of the baggage cars briefly, he wheeled around and fired a volley of shots at him. Incredibly, they all missed, probably because the gunman was nervous. Goat let himself fall out the door and rolled into a drainage ditch where he lied still. The gunman fired 2 more shots, both of them wild, and returned to the other passengers. 10 minutes later, Groot jumped out of the ditch and ran to safety. The next victim chosen by the terrorist, 22-year-old Lee Butler, wasn't so lucky. Oxford to stand by following the rear car, the young soldier was mercilessly gunned down. He died instantly and pitched forward onto the gravel beside the track. Remembering the hostages, some of them wept and moaned, wondered why he led away. They were also beginning to stand the bitter winter weather of some of the elderly that suffered. Even passengers' heroes was a real biologist, Haynes Prince, 40. The Southern somebody permit him to move about. Fearing advice, sooner or later, a doctor was called.